Welcome back to Slightly Another Story. History is not as fixed as it seems. Change one moment, and everything shifts. This time, the change is subtle, but the consequences are not. The internet that almost was. What if every post you've ever shared, every message you've ever sent, every memory you've ever trusted to the cloud, existed in one single place? At the start of the 2000s, no one imagined that question would ever matter. The internet still felt scattered, experimental, almost innocent. In dorm rooms lit by desk lamps and laptop glow, students refreshed pages that barely worked. In garages and rented offices, small teams chased big ideas with cheap servers and caffeine. Profiles loaded slowly. Photos took minutes to upload. But something was beginning to pull the world inward. In 2004, Facebook spread from campus to campus, promising real names and real connections. 2 years later, Twitter compressed the internet into short bursts of thought, where news broke faster than it could be verified. By 2010, Instagram taught us to see life as a highlight reel. Video followed, long, short, vertical, endless, until TikTok turned attention itself into a competitive sport. Forums like Reddit became digital cities, messy and powerful, ruled by communities instead of brands. Each platform felt like a different country. Different cultures. Different rules. You could be professional in one place, anonymous in another, invisible everywhere else. Feeds were once simple, chronological, honest, forgetful. Then they learned to remember. Algorithms replaced timelines, not to show what happened, but what would keep you watching. Attention became currency. Virality became destiny. Influencers replaced celebrities. Data replaced intuition. And yet, the separation mattered. If a platform changed too much, people could leave. If rules tightened, voices could move elsewhere. Power had borders. Competition kept giants nervous and users free, at least a little. The internet survived because it was many places, not one. But beneath the surface, the walls were thinning. Platforms copied each other's features. Stories appeared everywhere. Feeds began to feel the same. Algorithms converged, optimized for the same emotion, engagement. Users stopped traveling between networks and started living inside them. Governments dreamed of a single channel to reach everyone. Corporations imagined one dashboard, one profile, one identity per human. Cultures drifted toward convenience over choice. The modern digital world balanced on a thin line between diversity and monopoly, connection and control, freedom and inevitability. All it would take was one crisis. One collapse. One solution that promised safety, simplicity, and unity. And when that moment arrived, the internet would stop being many places. And begin becoming one. The merge. What if the internet didn't slowly evolve into one platform, but was forced to become one overnight? The breaking point didn't arrive quietly. It came as a cascade. A coordinated misinformation surge crossed platforms in hours, not days, elections destabilized, markets panicked, emergency services overwhelmed by viral falsehoods moving faster than truth could follow. Governments called it a crisis of fragmentation. Too many networks. Too many rules. No single authority to stop the spread. Within weeks, what had once been unthinkable became necessary. In closed-door meetings across Silicon Valley boardrooms, Brussels offices, and Washington hearing rooms, tech executives sat beside regulators and world leaders. Screens glowed late into the night. Lawyers argued. Economists warned. Security agencies insisted. The conclusion was the same everywhere: the internet had grown too powerful to remain divided. Antitrust laws were suspended, temporarily, they said. Emergency provisions passed with language dense enough to hide their permanence. Platforms were no longer competitors, they were liabilities. One by one, the giants were folded inward. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, TikTok, even community strongholds like Reddit, absorbed, rebranded, and sealed into a single entity. Press releases called it a global social infrastructure. The public gave it a simpler name, the platform. The year was 2029 when the merge was finalized. Legacy apps vanished from phones overnight, replaced by one icon. Log in once, and everything followed you. Accounts fused automatically, photos, posts, messages, metrics, stitched into a single, permanent profile. Timelines collapsed into one endless feed where journalists, influencers, activists, brands, and governments spoke side by side, separated only by algorithmic priority. The world reacted all at once. Confusion flooded comment sections that no longer belonged to anyone. Outrage spiked, then blurred into exhaustion. Some felt relief, finally, one place to be heard. Others felt something colder, the realization that there was nowhere else to go. Centralization promised order. It delivered certainty. Moderation became universal, unavoidable, and instant. Visibility was no longer earned across different cultures, it was granted by one system, under one standard. Reputation followed you everywhere. So did mistakes. This wasn't just a technical merger. It was psychological. There were no alternative platforms to flee to, no competing algorithms to balance power, no digital borders left to cross. The internet had become a single room, and everyone was inside it. 3 months later, without announcement or explanation, a global topic disappeared from the feed. No error message. No replacement. Just silence. And for the first time, the world began to understand what it truly meant to have only one place to speak. Power in one feed. What if political power no longer flowed through parliaments, borders, or armies, but through a single digital feed? In the old world, governments fought for influence through speeches, state media, press conferences, and national platforms. Narratives stopped at borders. A scandal in one country didn't automatically dominate another. Power moved slowly, filtered by institutions and time. That balance shattered the moment the platform became the only stage. Now every nation, whether a superpower or a microstate, spoke inside the same algorithmic environment, governed by the same invisible rules. A speech by a president in United States competed directly with a protest live stream from a small island nation. Diplomacy unfolded in comment sections. Elections rose and fell with engagement curves. Legitimacy was no longer claimed, it was measured. Governments felt it immediately. Ministries of information lost relevance as visibility replaced authority. Leaders who understood the feed, its timing, tone, and emotional triggers, rose faster than any party machine could support. Some never held office at all. They governed attention instead. Others resisted. They issued regulations, denounced the platform, demanded sovereignty. Their reach quietly shrank. Posts loaded slower. Trends passed them by. There were no bans, no announcements, just diminishing visibility. In a world with no alternative networks, resistance meant disappearance. In our timeline, states compete across fragmented media ecosystems, national broadcasters, regional platforms, controlled silos. Here, fragmentation no longer existed. One platform meant one narrative battlefield. One algorithm meant unequal amplification. One digital identity meant reputation became permanent and inescapable. Power redistributed itself. traditional media empires collapsed into background noise. Smaller nations and grassroots movements surged by mastering virality, suddenly able to influence global conversations once reserved for empires. Tech-aligned states gained leverage, not through armies, but through privileged access to moderation channels, data pipelines, and early policy drafts. Meanwhile, dissenting voices found silence more dangerous than opposition. To be ignored was to cease existing. New alliances formed, not around ideology, but around access. Coalitions negotiated moderation standards like treaties. Digital sanctions replaced economic ones, visibility throttling, search suppression, recommendation freezes. A country could be punished without a single ship moving or currency falling. Its leaders would simply stop appearing. Politics was no longer debated. It was calculated. Metrics replaced ideology. Engagement replaced consent. Governance became a question of optimization. The most successful leaders weren't those with the best policies, but those whose faces the algorithm favored when the feed refreshed. Then it happened. In the middle of a routine policy update, a major world leader, once dominant, omnipresent, vanished from the global feed. No arrest. No coup. No war. Official channels cited a technical correction to ranking systems. Within hours, their influence collapsed. Allies distanced themselves. Protests lost momentum. The state still existed, but its voice no longer mattered. That was the moment the world understood the truth. Sovereignty hadn't been overthrown. It had been quietly reallocated to whoever controlled the feed. The economy of one platform. What happens to money, labor, and value when attention is controlled by a single system? After politics bent to the feed, the economy followed, quietly, efficiently, and without resistance. Attention became the most valuable commodity on Earth, not because people chose it, but because the platform allocated it. Markets didn't disappear, they were absorbed. Demand no longer emerged from competition, it was summoned by visibility. Algorithms replaced price signals. Placement replaced logistics. If you were seen, you sold. If you weren't, you didn't. Global corporations adapted first. Boardrooms stopped debating branding and started negotiating reach. Contracts were rewritten to include visibility guarantees, ranking thresholds, and crisis clauses tied to policy updates. Advertising budgets ballooned while investment in physical infrastructure stalled. Why build stores, factories, or distribution networks when a single feed could deliver demand, instantly, anywhere? Small businesses lived on a knife's edge. A bakery went viral and hired 20 staff in a week. A local manufacturer lost algorithmic priority and collapsed by Friday. Success no longer scaled through merit or efficiency, but through exposure. Entire industries, media, entertainment, advertising, e-commerce, reorganized around feed placement instead of supply chains. New economies emerged inside the platform. Creators became sovereign microstates, complete with revenue streams, audiences, and diplomatic ties to moderators. Informal labor markets flourished, engagement farming, reputation repair, sentiment optimization. People didn't just work jobs anymore, they managed metrics. Resumes listed algorithmic stability alongside education. The cause and effect was brutal and simple. Political influence determined visibility. Visibility determined consumption. Consumption determined survival. In our timeline, companies diversify platforms and hedge markets. Here, there was no alternative channel, only compliance or disappearance. Regions that lost priority became economically invisible overnight. Ports stayed open. Factories ran. But without exposure, nothing moved. Nations once dominant in manufacturing watched influence drain toward those who mastered digital leverage instead. Winners and losers were unmistakable. Tech-aligned firms and data brokers gained unprecedented power, trading insight for access. Traditional retailers struggled to justify physical presence. Independent journalism faded unless endorsed by the feed. Offline industries survived only when translated into engagement. Everyday life reshaped itself around this reality. Careers were chosen for predictability under the algorithm. Incomes rose and fell with policy tweaks, not productivity. Economic anxiety wasn't driven by recessions anymore, but by updates. People refreshed the feed the way traders once watched stock tickers. And then the uncomfortable truth surfaced. The global economy no longer crashed. It recalibrated. Quietly. Instantly. Without votes or warnings. The proof came with a minor change, a small adjustment to content prioritization meant to improve user experience. Within hours, ad auctions spiked. Logistics firms froze orders. Currencies wobbled. By morning, markets across 3 continents had lost billions in value, without a single law passing or interest rate moving. That was the moment it became clear. The world's economy no longer answered to markets or governments, but to one invisible system. No one truly controlled. Technology shaped by one algorithm. What happens to science and technology when one algorithm decides what the world pays attention to? In every era before this one, progress followed curiosity, competition, and chaos. Breakthroughs came from rivalry between labs, nations, and ideas. Some paths failed. Others surprised everyone. Innovation was inefficient but resilient. That changed the moment the platform became the lens through which all attention flowed. After political power centralized and the economy reorganized around visibility, technology followed the same gravity. Research no longer advanced toward what was most unknown, but toward what was most seen. Funding flowed to projects that aligned with platform incentives. Grants were justified by engagement forecasts. Discoveries that couldn't be explained, visualized, or monetized inside the feed quietly lost priority. Governments and corporations adapted fast. Independence mattered less than compatibility. Technologies weren't designed to disrupt the system, they were optimized to function within it. Progress didn't stop. It narrowed. Artificial intelligence surged ahead of our timeline, not as a tool for exploration, but for prediction. Systems trained on the platform's unified dataset learned to anticipate behavior with unsettling accuracy. Moderation engines detected unrest before it organized. Recommendation models shaped desire before it formed. Prediction became governance. Biometric identity followed. One account meant one human. Facial recognition, voice signatures, gait analysis, once controversial, advanced rapidly under the promise of security and stability. Losing access wasn't just a ban anymore. It was digital erasure. So identity became precise, persistent, and permanent. Virtual environments thrived. Investment poured into spaces where work, leisure, and commerce collapsed into a single interface, measurable, controllable, optimizable. Meanwhile, physical infrastructure lagged. High-speed rail projects stalled. Space exploration slowed. Fundamental science struggled to justify itself without immediate algorithmic relevance. Compared to our world, some milestones arrived earlier. AI systems surpassed human behavioral prediction, language models guided diplomacy, simulations replaced trials. But other breakthroughs slipped. Clean energy scaled slower. Medical research drifted toward conditions that generated engagement rather than those that demanded patience. Transportation evolved incrementally, not radically. Daily life reflected these priorities. Communication became context-aware, filtered not just by content but by predicted impact. Warfare shifted from weapons to information disruption, destabilizing societies without firing a shot. Products were redesigned to be algorithm-friendly, easier to recommend, easier to monitor, easier to adjust. None of this required magic. The logic was simple. One platform meant one dataset. One dataset enabled unprecedented prediction. Prediction reshaped every decision that followed. Technological brilliance deepened, but resilience weakened. Redundant systems disappeared. Alternative approaches went unfunded. Innovation became incredibly precise in very few directions, and dangerously absent in others. By the time anyone noticed the cost, humanity had built the most accurate predictive technology in its history. It could forecast elections, markets, conflicts, even personal choices with chilling reliability. And yet, for the first time, humanity found itself less capable of imagining futures that the algorithm didn't already expect. Culture in one feed. What happens to culture when everyone lives inside the same digital space, speaks through the same interface, and performs for the same audience? For most of human history, culture grew slowly and separately. Languages fractured. Art argued with itself. Movements rose in basements, clubs, pamphlets, and forums, often invisible until they were unstoppable. Difference was friction. Friction created meaning. The platform erased that distance. Once political power centralized, the economy aligned around attention, and technology learned to predict behavior, culture followed the same logic. Expression no longer spread outward from communities, it descended from the feed. What people saw became what people made. Art adapted first. Paintings turned into striking thumbnails. Films broke into scenes designed to survive without context. Literature fragmented into modular lines, shareable, quotable, disposable. Music shortened, looped, and softened into background sound optimized for retention rather than resonance. Creators were no longer rebels or visionaries. They became cultural technicians, tuning output to metrics instead of instinct. Language shifted with it. Sentences grew shorter. Words sharpened. Emotional keywords replaced nuance. Regional dialects faded as universal slang, engineered by engagement data, spread across continents in days. Humor synchronized. Outrage followed templates. The feed didn't just translate culture, it standardized it. Everyday life reflected this new rhythm. Identical trends appeared simultaneously in Seoul, Lagos, São Paulo, and Berlin. Celebrations were planned for visibility first, meaning second. People learned the rituals, post, react, disappear, before the algorithm moved on. Silence became suspicious. To be unseen was to be irrelevant. In our world, countercultures escaped to margins, underground scenes, independent platforms, slow-burning communities. Here, there were no margins left. No parallel spaces to retreat into. No place where culture could grow unnoticed. Everything surfaced at once, or not at all. Collective identity transformed. People measured themselves in engagement, not belonging. Memory became algorithmic, resurfaced when useful, buried when inconvenient. Cultural relevance turned temporary and compulsory. You didn't discover art anymore. It arrived. You didn't grow into ideas. They trended past you. And yet, something strange happened. For the first time in history, humanity shared a nearly unified cultural moment. The same jokes. The same references. The same symbols. Expression synchronized across the planet. But diversity of tone, risk, and thought began to shrink. The world felt louder and more alike. Which raises a final, uncomfortable question. If everyone is finally connected to the same culture, does culture still mean anything at all? Belief in one system. What happens to faith when every belief is visible, measured, ranked, and instantly judged? For most of human history, belief thrived in private spaces. Temples, churches, mosques, synagogues, forests, rooms with closed doors. Faith lived in silence as much as in speech. Doubt had room to breathe. Conviction didn't require witnesses. The platform changed that. After culture synchronized into one feed, after technology learned to predict behavior, after power and economy aligned around visibility, belief followed the same gravitational pull. Faith did not disappear, but it transformed under observation. Traditional religions adapted to survive. Sermons shortened. Sacred texts were excerpted into shareable fragments. Rituals streamed, optimized for retention curves and emotional peaks. Spiritual leaders rose and fell by engagement metrics, their authority no longer grounded in lineage or doctrine, but in reach. Quiet, contemplative belief struggled. Stillness could not compete with reaction. Digital temples filled with noise instead of silence. New belief systems emerged to fill the gaps. Data-driven morality took hold. What most people agreed with must be right. Algorithmic ethics followed. Good became whatever reduced conflict, maximized stability, and kept the feed calm. Moral complexity flattened into acceptable ranges. Extremes faded, not because they were wrong, but because they disrupted flow. Some thinkers called this progress. They argued the platform revealed collective truth, that humanity, observed at scale, could finally see itself clearly. Others warned that meaning could not survive constant measurement. That faith required darkness, uncertainty, and the freedom to be unseen. A few movements went further. They rejected visibility entirely. No profiles. No metrics. No posts. Small, scattered groups seeking belief outside the feed, not as protest, but as preservation. The platform labeled them anomalies. Potential risks. Daily life absorbed these shifts. Laws increasingly mirrored what appeared morally acceptable online. Public repentance replaced private conscience. Moral failure became permanent, searchable, resurfaced, impossible to outgrow. Forgiveness existed, but only when engagement allowed it. Doubt became dangerous. Silence became suspicious. Prayer didn't vanish, but it changed shape. It looked like posting. Like aligning oneself publicly with the right symbols, causes, and phrases. Faith was practiced under constant witness, shaped by the fear of being misunderstood, misranked, or forgotten. Belief grew safer. More predictable. Less likely to fracture society. And yet, it grew thinner. Which leaves one final, unsettling question hanging in the feed. If belief must always be visible to exist, can faith still be sincere at all? Everyday life in one platform. What does an ordinary day look like when every aspect of life is quietly shaped by a single digital system? It doesn't begin with sirens or surveillance drones. It begins with a feed. People wake up and check their standing the way past generations check the weather. Visibility up. Engagement stable. No flags overnight. A good start. Careers are chosen early, not for passion, but for algorithmic reliability. Jobs that stay neutral, predictable, low risk. Creative ambition survives, but cautiously, trimmed to fit acceptable ranges. Education adapts. Children aren't just taught math or history, they learn platform literacy. How phrasing affects reach. How silence can be misread. How to manage reputation before it manages you. Essays are graded not only on content, but on tone safety. Curiosity is encouraged, within limits. Families feel it too. Conversations bend around what can be repeated, clipped, or resurfaced years later. Arguments end early. Jokes are tested in private before being risked in public. Even at home, people speak as if the room might remember. Social mobility shifts shape. Class is no longer defined only by wealth, but by digital reputation. A clean history opens doors. A single misstep can freeze someone in place, not dramatically, but permanently. There are no public trials, just slow disappearance from opportunity. Upward movement still exists, but it's fragile and carefully managed. Communities reorganize. Geography matters less than shared exposure. People feel closer to strangers who see the same trends than to neighbors who don't. Gender roles flatten in appearance, visibility rewards performative equality, but expectations harden beneath the surface. Without anonymity, every action carries long memory. Reinvention becomes rare. Emotionally, life grows steadier. Predictability brings safety. Fewer scandals. Fewer collapses. Fewer public failures. But also fewer second chances. Anxiety replaces fear, not sharp or dramatic, but constant. A low-level awareness of being seen, measured, remembered. This isn't oppression. It's adaptation. There's no logging off without consequence. Absence is noted. Visibility declines. Identity thins. There are no alternative spaces to restart, no fresh accounts to escape into, no private corners untouched by the system. Privacy still exists, but only in moments, never in history. Belonging depends on presence. Stability depends on compliance. Silence carries risk. And yet, most people accept it. Life is safer. Fairer. More predictable. Which raises a final, unsettling comparison. If life becomes safer, fairer, and more predictable, what happens to those who need to disappear in order to become themselves? The world under one platform. What does the world look like when every nation, culture, and individual lives inside the same digital system? From a distance, it looks calmer. Cities no longer grow around banks or stock exchanges, but around data corridors and content hubs. Towers hum with servers instead of traders. Government districts resemble hybrid control rooms, part ministry, part moderation center, where policy teams sit beside platform liaisons, watching the global feed update in real time. Public squares glow with screens, not monuments, reflecting what the world is talking about now, not what it once remembered. This is the present-day reality shaped by a single gravitational force. Political power still exists, but it flows differently. Elections matter, but influence is measured long before ballots are cast. Leaders rise by maintaining reach, trust scores, and algorithmic stability. Global summits now happen twice, first inside the platform, where narratives are tested and aligned, and only later in physical rooms where outcomes feel almost ceremonial. Borders remain on maps, but digitally they are sharper than ever: access levels, visibility tiers, moderation regimes. Economies move in sync. Markets don't panic anymore, they adjust. Stability depends on platform confidence. A dip in trust metrics can slow trade faster than sanctions ever did. Cultural relevance is synchronized across continents, festivals, causes, outrage, celebration, all arriving together, fading together. Technology hums beneath it all, optimized not for discovery, but for uptime, control, and frictionless moderation. Global events unfold inside the feed first. Protests rise as trending clusters peak and dissolve when visibility shifts. Crises are managed by throttling reach, redirecting attention, softening language. Wars are less frequent, not because conflict vanished, but because narratives are guided before violence escalates. Force is still possible. It's just inefficient compared to influence. The world feels held. There is less chaos. Fewer sudden collapses. Fewer rogue actors. Surprises are rare. Breakthroughs arrive cautiously, pre-aligned with expectations. Life across nations feels synchronized, predictable, and strangely familiar, no matter where you stand. And yet, beneath the stability, something tightens. When one system stabilizes everything, failure becomes unthinkable. Redundancy disappears. Alternatives fade from memory. The idea that the world could function without the platform feels abstract, almost irresponsible. Peace, order, and connection now rest on a single structure. A single feed. A single point of coordination. Which means the final question is no longer how this system works, but what happens when it is finally tested. An ordinary life in one feed. What does an ordinary life feel like when there is only one digital place to exist? In 2026, it feels mostly calm. They wake up before the alarm, the room still dim, and reach for the screen out of habit rather than urgency. One feed. One account. Nothing alarming overnight. Visibility steady. No flags. The day can begin. This check has replaced the small anxieties people once carried: missed messages, scattered apps, forgotten passwords. Life is simpler now. Work is predictable. Chosen carefully. A role that stays neutral, avoids controversy, rarely attracts attention. Stability matters more than ambition. They learned that early, back when teachers explained platform literacy alongside reading and math, how tone travels, how phrasing lingers, how history never quite fades. They were good at it. Careful. Observant. At work, systems run smoothly. Filters catch most things before humans need to. Moderation hums in the background like electricity, unnoticed until it's gone. Messages auto-adjust. Suggestions feel helpful. Nothing breaks. Nothing surprises. Lunch is quiet. A few reactions exchanged. A safe joke. Nothing sharp. Friendships are maintained the same way: small acknowledgements, steady presence, no sudden shifts. Everyone understands the rules without ever listing them. At home, conversations drift, then pause. There are things they don't say out loud, not because they're forbidden, but because they might last longer than intended. Memories used to fade. Now they resurface, sometimes years later, when the context is gone but the words remain. Even leisure is careful. Shows recommended for comfort, not challenge. Music that loops softly. Hobbies chosen for low-risk visibility. The future is planned with the past in mind, every decision weighed against the permanence of one digital history. At night, the glow of the screen returns. There's a moment, a thought worth sharing. The cursor blinks. Silence stretches. They imagine how it might be read, ranked, remembered. The feed waits patiently. They save the draft instead. The comfort remains. So does the tension. And in that small, private pause, between expression and restraint, there's a part of life the platform will never see. Technology inside the one platform. What kind of technology emerges when one platform becomes the center of communication, identity, and memory? At first glance, it looks like progress refined. Systems talk to each other seamlessly. Nothing feels experimental anymore, because almost nothing is allowed to be. Technology didn't slow down in this world. It narrowed. Some tools still exist, but they evolved differently. Communication is instant, reliable, and permanently contextual. Messages carry metadata not just about time and place, but intent, tone, and risk. Spontaneity fades in favor of traceability. Every interaction is designed to be moderated, referenced, and remembered, because identity itself is continuous and indivisible. Mobility technologies follow the same logic. Transportation favors predictability over speed, tracking over freedom. Routes are optimized not just for efficiency, but for behavioral modeling. Movement is smooth, frictionless, and always legible to the system. Getting lost becomes rare. So does wandering. Medicine advances quietly but profoundly. Preventative diagnostics outperform emergency care. Mental health tools focus on stabilization, stress smoothing, and behavioral normalization. Crises are intercepted early, flagged by patterns before symptoms become visible. Treatment is effective, but standardized. Outliers are treated as risks to be managed, not mysteries to explore. Other technologies race far ahead of our timeline. Predictive systems grow extraordinarily precise, trained on a unified dataset of human behavior. Conflict forecasting outpaces diplomacy. Recommendation engines don't just suggest, they anticipate. AI excels not at creativity, but at containment, moderation, influence balancing, narrative alignment. Warfare shifts accordingly. Physical conflict becomes inefficient when attention control can destabilize societies without visible force. Biometric systems reach near perfection. Identity is verified continuously: face, voice, motion, rhythm. There is no moment of being unobserved by infrastructure, even when no one is watching. Security becomes ambient. So does accountability. And then there are the technologies that never arrive. There are no anonymous networks. No parallel systems operating in the dark. No decentralized architectures capable of surviving outside the platform's ecosystem. Experiments that can't be monitored don't receive funding. Tools that can't be moderated don't scale. Innovation that resists integration quietly withers. This isn't censorship. It's selection. One platform enables efficiency. Efficiency enables control. Control reshapes what innovation is for. Daily life reflects the trade-off. Communication is safer, calmer, less volatile, but also less surprising. Medicine prevents suffering, but flattens difference. Technology works beautifully, invisibly, predictably. Nothing breaks. Nothing escapes. Compared to our world, this one feels smoother, quieter, more complete. But it is also less chaotic, less experimental, and less forgiving. The rough edges where new futures once emerged have been polished away. Which leads to the final technological question. If humanity finally perfected its systems by removing friction and fragmentation, did it solve chaos? Or quietly eliminate the possibility of escape? The price of one voice. The most unexpected consequence of a world with only one social platform wasn't total control. And it wasn't total freedom. It was something quieter. A world where everyone is heard. And no one can disappear. Humanity believed unification would solve its problems. One platform would end misinformation. One feed would calm division. One system would finally let everyone speak and be understood. It sounded reasonable. responsible, even compassionate. And in many ways, it worked. Politics stabilized as narrative centralized. Economy smoothed as attention became measurable and predictable. Culture synchronized, belief systems softened, daily life grew safer and more orderly. Fewer scandals. Fewer extremists. Fewer digital wars tearing societies apart. History didn't collapse. Civilization didn't burn. Progress didn't fail. It succeeded too well. Because somewhere along the way, chaos was replaced with soft conformity. Noise gave way to silence. Disagreement didn't vanish, it was averaged out, smoothed into algorithmic consensus. The feed didn't force people to agree. It simply made disagreement inefficient. People still had choices. They could speak. They could participate. They could be seen. But they could no longer step away. Every belief was visible. Every mistake permanent. Every thought weighed against its future consequences. Validation became meaning. Safety became survival. Self-censorship became instinct, not because anyone demanded it, but because the system rewarded it. The paradox became impossible to ignore. There were fewer lies, but also fewer uncomfortable truths. Fewer extremists, but also fewer visionaries. Fewer digital battlefields, but no places left to run from the crowd. What was traded away wasn't freedom of speech. It was freedom of absence. The right to change without witnesses. The right to fail quietly. The right to exist without being observed. So here's the question this timeline leaves us with. If the world finally speaks with one voice, who decides when silence is no longer allowed? And is unity still progress? If it costs the right to be unseen? There is no single answer. And maybe that's the point. If this story made you uncomfortable, curious, or conflicted, share your thoughts in the comments. Agree with it. Disagree with it. Challenge it. Alternate histories aren't about predicting the future, they're about questioning the paths we assume are inevitable. This was just one moment where humanity chose unity over plurality. Next time, we'll explore another. If you enjoyed this journey, like the video, subscribe to the channel. And follow for more immersive what-if stories. Where history doesn't break. It quietly takes a different turn. And this is where our story pauses, not because it's finished, but because history never truly ends. Every choice leaves echoes, every what-if opens another door. If this version of the past made you wonder, imagine how many others remain untold. Stay with this channel, because the next story might change everything you thought you knew. Until then, keep questioning the history you're given.